My name is Anthony Infanti. I'm a professor of law at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and I'm also the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. I'm here to talk today about my international tax course, which I've been teaching the entire time I've been at the University of Pittsburgh. The international tax course that I teach is about international tax. International tax is a bit of a misnomer because there really is no body of international tax rules. What we talk about is the U.S. rules that apply to cross-border transactions. So it's focusing on that. I've always taught it as a problem-based course, which is a little bit different from what you usually get in law school. So it's not just pure lecture or even Socratic dialogue. I mean, there is some lecture because the rules are often very, very complicated, and it's helpful to provide students a framework for thinking about the rules. And then we learn the rules really by applying them through problems. The way that I teach this course is not just problem-based, but I also try to use it as a vehicle for training students and teaching students about how to be a tax lawyer. Doing a lot of the things that I used to do when I was in practice for 5 or 6 years before I started teaching tax. So I break up their assignments over the semester into 4 discrete assignments. The first assignment is purely research-based. And so what I have them do is a series of tasks with a variety of different platforms. So they have to use Lexis, Westlaw, they use another electronic resource that's useful for tax, and they have to use the hard copy resources in the library. And I bring in representatives from each of the electronic services to give them training on how to do research in tax, and then I give them a training on how to use the hard copy resources in the library. And then I have them go through this assignment and do each of these tasks, explain to me exactly the steps they took to do each of them, reflect on the different platforms and what was the easiest, most efficient way, most updated, information they could get, which platform was better than the others, getting them to reflect on what was the most efficient way to do the research at the end of the day, and really training them on how to be a good researcher, because that's a lot of what tax lawyers do, is research and writing, which is what the other 3 assignments are about. So the other 3 assignments are 3 discrete memos that I have them do during the semester, which is the most common type of writing that I and most tax lawyers who especially do transactional work do in practice. To get the students more practice ready, the assignments that I give them, those 3 research and writing assignments that they do, don't just help to make sure that they've comprehended what we've covered or build on what we've covered substantively. I also try to build in things that replicate what their life is going to be like as a new attorney, and things that they'll have to grapple with that you don't usually learn about when you're in law school. Things like, well, if you have an area of the law that's kind of a moving target, that's been changing a lot or is about to change, that there's one set of rules that apply now, but another set is about to come in. Sometimes I'll give them an assignment that covers both sets of rules, that makes them either have to think about which set applies to the facts that I've given them, or if they're advising a client in a transaction that's going to go over time, how do you grapple with advising somebody in a changing environment? How do you advise them when you know the law is going to be this for this amount of time and then it's going to change to something else after that? So getting them to think about that. Also, I've folded in sometimes into the assignment, requiring them to do research in an area that they haven't covered, that we haven't covered in this course, and that I know for sure they haven't covered in any of the other courses that we cover at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, to make sure that they then have to do some outside research, learn about a new area of the law, but then start thinking about, well, how much of that do I need to communicate in a memo? How much of that learning that I want to show off really needs to be there for a partner or a client? I mean, does it really need to be there? It gets them to develop that skill of learning to edit themselves and figure out exactly what needs to be in a memo. I mean, it's more work in the sense that I typically use the same research assignment from year to year, because it's just getting them to do the steps and learn how to do the research. It's really a process, it's not a result. So using the same problem for that, I don't view as an issue. But for the writing assignments, there are different ones every year. So I have to come up with 3 new writing assignments each time I teach these courses, and thinking about not just what do I want to get them to substantively cover, but also trying to think about the other more practice-oriented, practical ways of getting them to, think about the topic. That takes some time usually. It takes some thinking, and you have to develop the assignments. So yes, it does take some more time, and it naturally takes time to grade them and give them feedback, because one of the things about the class, and something that we've moved to at Pitt in general, is trying to focus on, we adopted a few years ago, a W requirement. So it's a second writing requirement that's supposed to be multiple shorter papers with formative feedback. And so that's what I do with this, is I give them formative feedback on each one of them. So they're getting comments on each of their memos that they can then incorporate into the next one, which is why they usually improve over the semester. It's not just repeating the same assignment over and over again. It's repeating it and getting feedback on how could you improve next time. Even if it's not the exact same assignment, you're not redrafting what you were doing, but you can take the comments and incorporate it the same way you would in practice. You're not going to repeat and redraft the same assignment over and over and over again for a partner. You have to learn from the first assignment in doing the next one. In the classroom, I try to create a collaborative atmosphere among the students because they're there really just to learn for the sake of learning. There is no exam at the end of the semester, so they're not all competing against each other to try to do better than the other person on a curve. They're all really there just to learn. And so that's the kind of approach that I try to take in the classroom, and not cold calling on them, not really using Socratic method. I mean, I generally just look for volunteers and trying to get them to work through the problem with me, trying to see who else can come up with another angle to it that other people missed, different ways of thinking about the problem to come up with the best answer that we possibly can get. And I also encourage the students to work outside of class in preparing the answers to the problems together. Because oftentimes one of them will catch something that the other one doesn't catch, and they'll learn from each other in the same way that you will in practice. In practice, the memos are very individual focused because you do your own writing, in the sense of if you're writing a memo to the file or a memo to the client or a memo to the partner, you're going to be writing your own memo. You're not usually going to be doing the writing directly in collaboration with others, but often you'll be doing indirect collaboration in the sense of bouncing your analysis off of somebody else. Talking to other people about, well, did I miss anything? Should I be looking at something else? What's going on? And that's the kind of atmosphere that I try to create in the classroom. What would be really cool would be to then move into something different where they could do teamwork and they could do collaboration, because I've always found when I have tried to do collaboration in other classes that students are often resistant to the idea of doing teamwork or collaboration, that they feel like they should just be judged on their own work, that they can control their own work, they can't control the work of others. But what they don't realize is that in practice, you often have to work with other people. And that's a skill that you have to develop, and the other people you have to work with aren't always the people you want to. They're not always your friends. You can't always pick the people you get to work with. And so they have to start to learn how to do that. What would be really great would be moving into other types of writing. Yes, memos are the most common form of writing that I did as a tax lawyer, but it wasn't the only writing that I did as a tax lawyer. And it would be really great, I think, to team up with other folks teaching corporate law or other things and do more of a transactional-based class, like a deal type of a class, where then the students could work in collaboration with each other and in collaboration with other students who are focused on other areas of the law. Or even better, if you get some of the business students from the business school involved, people who are not involved with law at all, and you start seeing how they interact with each other and what some of the dynamics and some of the tensions are between the different groups. The reason why I switched so quickly, I think, from a very traditional type of class with an exam in international tax to something that's more practice-oriented was in part my own frustration, and the students felt frustration, expressed frustration about the exam and having an exam-based class and how much pressure that created, to really thinking about, in a more reflective and deliberative fashion, how can I help prepare my students to be tax lawyers? Because when we're talking about international tax, you're talking about students that are really, really interested in being tax lawyers. It's usually the hardcore tax students who take international tax. You don't usually have someone who just picks it up to fill a hole in their schedule. So it really made me think about how could I best serve my students in preparing them for practice.